Hello, thank you for joining with me. The week 11 schedule is not out yet, so I thought I'd do a review of week 10 because that helps me, and I wanted to do a review, so I thought I'd just do it on video. We are in A Course in Miracles, complete and annotated edition, based on the original handwritten notes of Helen Schuckman. This is put out by a Circle of Atonement. It's edited by Robert Perry, and we are reading along with the Course Companion group in Facebook, or you can go to CourseCompanions.com, and that is led by Emily Bennington with Robert Perry's involvement as well. So day 64, this is from last week, Cameo 16, Helen's Extra Mile. And I thought I'd just read the notes from the Course Companion group as a study, or as a review, that's a better word, as a review for last week, week 10. This is a brief cameo, so my comments will be brief as well. A few things stood out to me. First, Jesus does support going the extra mile for another. How could he not? Given that that's his own saying. But in an age in which there is so much talk of protecting one's boundaries and avoiding codependency, it's useful to note that he does. We can get so focused on avoiding inappropriate devotion to others that we become suspicious of devotion altogether. Second, I have long been struck by that dissection of the woman's dynamics in relation to her husband. You look at that and think, well, that's marriage, of course. It's not all marriages, but this is the sort of thing that goes on in relationships in general and marriage in particular. On the surface, we are well-intentioned, but beneath that, there's something else going on. There are all kinds of unconscious dynamics splashing out onto our partners and staining our clothes as well. In the meantime, we have no idea why our partners are complaining. What's wrong with them, we wonder? The real question is, what's wrong with us? If you just bear with me, I want to straighten that out. Third, there is something about unusual gifts like Helen's that makes people reluctant to use them. There are, of course, people who aren't reluctant to use them, but unfortunately many of them are driven by the desire for personal glory. The people who aren't interested in such unusual gifts as sources of ego inflation are just the kind of people who can be trusted with the gifts, and unfortunately, just the kind of people who are likely to shy away from them. The good news is that if you've declined to use an unusual gift of yours in service of others, you, like Helen, can always change your mind. And that was written by Robert Perry. Okay, the next page. Day 65 was section 1 of chapter 4, The Last Foolish Journey. The last foolish journey. Egocentricity makes me dispirited and embarrassed. My ego tries to solve this by heroically tilting at windmills in an effort to puff itself up. But this just further chains me to the ego's tragic cycle. In contrast, true devotion to others makes me feel inspired, the opposite of dispirited. Reflection. This section warns against launching ourselves on the foolish journey of trying to solve our ego's sense of unworthiness by puffing ourselves up. This chains us to the ego's cycle, which always ends in crucifying ourselves. We thus make the pathetic human error of clinging to the old rugged cross, rather than demonstrating that we have overcome the cross. In thinking about your own life, what crusades have you undertaken that upon reflection were about trying to make yourself more worthy through heroic deeds? My dogs are crazy. Excerpts. Your real worth is your divine authorship, and your spirit is its acknowledgement. I cannot guide your mind except as you associate it with your spirit. You are free to crucify yourself as often as you choose. But this was not the gospel I intended to offer you. We have another journey to undertake, and I hope that, if you will read these teachings carefully, they will help to prepare you to undertake it. All right, so that was day 65, chapter 4, section 1, the last foolish journey. My doggy's up here sniffing. I don't know why. Say hi. Say hi. You're so beautiful. That's Myrtle. And then we read Cameo 17, Bill's class. This cameo reminded me a lot of the previous one, in which Helen was initially reluctant to fulfill her scribal function. From these two cameos, you could easily get the impression that we are often reluctant to step into a genuine calling. The conventional wisdom is that our calling is our passion, that we should follow our bliss. But apparently sometimes our calling represents a buried passion that on the surface we want no part of. I couldn't help but apply the material in this cameo to teaching the course. Assuming it's fair to do that, what we get if we do so is something like the following. Certain people have been very carefully chosen to teach A Course in Miracles. They may be reluctant to fulfill this calling, perhaps because they feel they will be placing their self-image at the mercy of the images their students will have of them. But they have been chosen because they are the antidote to the way the Course is generally taught. Most teachers have an unfortunate tendency to teach the Course abnormally, meaning that they teach it from the ego. Their teaching, therefore, has the effect of reinforcing rather than lessening the ego in their students. In contrast, the teachers who have been chosen are particularly well suited to teach the Course while standing apart from the ego, which will help their students shake loose from theirs. One thing this highlights for me is the importance of the manner in which we teach. Presumably, both Bill and the teachers Jesus is criticizing were teaching the same basic, there's a crease in my paper, material, maybe even using the same textbook, but while teaching that material, they were also injecting into it their own personal perspectives. While talking about particular mental illnesses, they were also conveying a larger implicit message, an overall framing of those illnesses and their healing. This implicit framing is so important that it ends up making the difference between lessening and increasing the abnormality in their students. It ends up, in other words, making all the difference. Which means that we have to think about what larger attitudes and perspectives we are injecting as we teach the Course. What is the larger message behind our words between the lines? As the manual says, it is all about the teaching underlying what you say. So what is the teaching underlying what we say? Are we giving the subtle impression that the ego is all there is? That we are all stuck in a prison from which there is no escape? Conversely, are we trying to be so affirming and uplifting that we give the impression that the ego is hardly worth bothering about? In which case, our students will feel superficially uplifted and only later realize that the ego's iron grip has merely tightened. I apologize, I'm a little congested. Allergies are kicking my butt. Getting back to the teachers who have been called to teach the course, it is vital that they answer the call. This is both for the sake of their students and for the sake of those who will be influenced by their students. Bill was teaching future teachers and therapists, thus he gave them the implicit message that mental illness is not an inescapable prison. I'm sorry, I think I missed a word there. So Bill was teaching future teachers and therapists. Thus, if he gave them the implicit message that mental illness is not an inescapable prison, they would be inspired with hope that real healing is possible. And they would then go on to infect hundreds and thousands more with this hope. Surely something analogous to this is also true of teachers of the course. So if you are one of those people who have been very carefully chosen to teach A Course in Miracles, and if, like Bill, you are reluctant to fulfill this function, you should set next to your reluctance what Jesus is saying here. So set next to your reluctance what Jesus is saying here. You should realize you've been chosen precisely because you have the ability to teach the course from a place apart from the ego, which is crucial, since this is a way out of the ego. You have been chosen as the antidote to the way the course is usually taught. Your function, if you accept it, will inspire rather than dispirit the students who are sent to you, and through them will inspire hundreds and thousands more. And in the process of engendering hope, you yourself will also experience hope. And when you get up to teach, you should know that you will not be left alone. Jesus himself has promised that he will attend your classes as a demonstration of his belief in you. And as he says, you should at least credit me with some dependability in keeping my promises. I never make them lightly. And that is written by Robert Perry. Okay, and we're moving on here. Section 2 of Chapter 4, The Devoted Teacher. Overview, The Devoted Teacher. I fear teaching because I fear change and because I fear placing my sense of worth at the mercy of my students. But my worth is not established by my teaching. It has been forever established by God. Realizing this will free me to be a devoted teacher, devoted to my students instead of my image. In this section, Jesus says, if you are willing to renounce the role of guardian of your thought system and open it to me, I will correct it very gently and lead you home. In what ways are you standing guard over your own ideas when it comes to how you perceive yourself and others? And how can you more willingly and proactively release these misperceptions and open your thought system to Jesus' correction? Excerpts. Teaching and learning are your greatest strengths now because you must change your own mind and help others to change theirs. Egos can clash in any situation, but souls cannot clash at all. The second half of Part 2, The Devoted Teacher, Chapter 4. Reflection. This section states that your worth is not established by your teaching. Your worth was established by God. Whether you identify with the role of teacher or not, it's safe to say that we all view some form of external valuation as a measurement of our value. In what ways has accomplishment been your source of identity, and how can you more meaningfully ground your identity in spiritual versus worldly foundations? Excerpts. God is not the author of fear, you are. You are not at peace because you are not fulfilling your function. God gave you a very lofty responsibility which you are not meeting. You know this and you are afraid, but you have chosen to be afraid instead of meeting it. Of your ego, you can do nothing to save yourself or others, but of your spirit, you can do everything for the salvation of both. Sorry. Thank you for your patience with me. I feel like I'm jumbling the words. I'll shut up. Section 3, the making of the ego. That's all ego too. I shouldn't be surprised that the separation could happen. If I look at my mind in the present, it clearly has the capacity to throw away truth in favor of illusions so that those illusions now become its reality. But my mind doesn't have to function that way. Instead of asking the question how the ego came to be all those years ago, ask yourself how you are recreating the separation when you choose to misperceive in this moment. Whew. Excerpts. History would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. Each person makes one ego for himself, although it is subject to enormous variation because of its instability, and one for everyone he perceives, which is equally variable. And lastly, the ego's need to confirm itself. The scarcity principle, the ego's sense of being lacking in reality, is its driving force. It tries to fill this lack of reality through physical pleasure, through acknowledging the reality of other egos, through comparing itself to other egos, through giving to get, and even through fulfilling its full potential. Reflection. This section states that the ego literally lives by comparisons. In what ways have comparisons played a role in your life? Are you constantly evaluating yourself as more or less worthy, powerful, attractive, etc. than others? What effect have these comparisons had on your sense of equality with others, on your charity, on your generosity, and on your sense of inner abundance? What about your peace? Self-esteem in ego terms means nothing more than that the ego has deluded itself into accepting its reality and is therefore temporarily less predatory. The ego never gives out of abundance because it was made as a substitute for it. The ego cannot survive without judgment. And that is the end of our review. Thank you so much. That's the end of Chapter 4. This is Chapter 4, Section 4, the ego's need to confirm itself. And these are notes from the Course Companion group on Facebook and Emily Bennington's website. And I believe week 11 will be released tomorrow, and I will read from that. Thank you so much for joining with me. I love you.